Now, I believe that if we're living in a society and a community and that sort of thing, that we have a certain responsibility to help within that structure that we've chosen to live in. But nobody has the right to come and tell me how, or that I have to pay them something to be in order to be able to do this. That's slavery.
In the case of mortgages with banks, where you've signed a contract with them, that's a different scenario.
Was it done with full disclosure?
Well,
Did they tell you that you weren't borrowing anything of substance, that you were creating the money with your signature, that actually it was yours anyway? No. Did they sign that part of the agreement? No. It's fraud. Mortgage.
That's
death
the point.
grip.
That's the point. They don't sign the sign. You see witnesses of your signature, but not a signature from a second party.
And all they're doing is they're producing the money, because this is the whole thing came up about tax. People say, oh yeah, but you want to use the hospitals, and we need the tax to pay for the hospitals. No, you don't. Look at this, let's apply a bit of logic to that. Where does the money come from for people who earn wages? Where does the money come from for them to pay tax? Well, from their employer, or from their applying their craft or their trade. They get the money. Well, where does that money come from? Ultimately, it comes from a bank. Where does the bank get it from? They invent it. They invent it and debt bond you. They invent the money from your signature. Because what should be happening here is everybody born on this land should be receiving an entitlement to cover your basic living expenses. If you want to earn any more or get any more for whatever purpose, then you go out and you put your energy out and you get reparated for that energy, and you do that on an individual contractual basis. I'm going to provide this service or this energy or this skill, and the person's going to provide X amount. It's fair consideration. We're in agreement with it. Cool. Contract can't be overridden by legislation, because that's an agreement of the parties. But because not enough people actually understand how law and legislation operate, it allows this inveigling of the legislation to override right down to our human rights and override them. But it's not lawful and it's not right. And more people are becoming aware of that. And that's what we need, is we need awareness. Because until you understand that you're being treated as a slave, how can you free yourself from slavery? And most people aren't aware that actually they are being treated as slaves, because when you talk about slavery to people, they see Africans in chains. That's the concept people have of slavery. You know? They haven't yet been able to distill that down to realise that a slave is just somebody that's told what to do, and if they don't do what they're told to do, they get punished for it. That's a slave. They haven't been able to marry the two together, because they are led to believe, indoctrinated to believe, that when you talk about slavery, it's about Africans in chains.
Forced labour is another good expression, I think.
Forced labour.
Alternative to slavery, yeah, because that's what a lot of it is, isn't it?
Well, there's a bit came through in the textbooks in Texas now. They're actually changing things from slave labour into volunteers. Do you volunteer to work till death? If you don't, I'm going to shoot you. I'll volunteer. It's like, who makes this shit up? Yeah. Now, there's a lot of this information actually comes out, not just through the social media, but it actually also comes out in movies. Because what we've got, and this is where we don't hold to the fact that everybody within the regime is wrong, evil, or bad. You know, it's an ideology that's being imposed, and a lot of people that are part of this ideology don't understand the ideology they're a part of. So they are ignorant of their place in it. And that's why we look at these situations as means of education to people. Because I hope somebody would have educate me. I don't know.
How do you deal in situation? So you are saying that name is your property.
Yep.
You are stopped by police and they ask you, give me your name. How do you respond?
Give me your name. Well, you can tell them who you are if you want to. It's your name. It's your property.
Yeah. So you are giving them your property.
No, I'm informing him of some information.
Okay.
Yeah. Give me your name. Oh, sod off. However, I'll tell you who I am. And by the way, there's a large schedule of fees attached to the misuse of that. Best you be aware of that. That's my full disclosure, because it's my property. You know, because what we're looking at doing now with the proclamations is actually carrying it with you.
Yeah.
You know? If you know that you haven't breached the peace and you're pulled over, for a start, you're actually involved in wasting public monies for that matter, because you're allowing somebody to perpetrate a fraud upon you. Now, here's an interesting thing. Fraud is a criminal offence. If you are aware of a fraud and do nothing to stop it, then you become a party to it. That's why in my paperwork going into court, I go, there appears to be fraud happening in this court. I will not be a party to this fraud. Because as soon as I become a party to it and do nothing, you know, as soon as I do nothing about it, I become a party to it. That's why fraud is such a criminal offence, because it's about deception, about enslavement. So in that situation, again, as I say, your proclamation gives you your ground to stand on. All you're doing is publicly informing somebody that which you inherently know within yourself anyway. So in that situation, you can hand them a copy of your proclamation. Policeman asks who you are. First thing you need to do is you need to find out who they are. You ask for their identification. Remember public servant, public servant, public? Yeah. You ask them for their identification, because there's a case just down in Auckland recently where they had a guy masquerading around as a peace officer, as a policeman. It wasn't. So how do you know it's not one of those? Standing at the side of your car. So ask them for their identification. They're obliged to give it, because they're a servant of the people. Have a look at their identification. No, this is all you need. Really? How do I know that's right? Give your card. Because if they're not prepared to give you a business card, you know, their card saying who they are, how do you know they are who they're saying they are? And a lot of what I've seen is that a lot of those don't carry them. Ooh. No. Got to have it on. It's part of them operating correctly. So, get their business card, get their identification, hand them a copy of your proclamation. As soon as they pick up the proclamation, just say you've now been served. Just say have been. In other words, you have fully disclosed to them who you are and where you stand. And you're telling them, you don't have jurisdiction over me unless I breach the peace. And then you must act in such a manner as to help me restore the harm. Not to punish me, not to drag me off and throw me in a holding cell, not to march me through some trumped up military tribunal. So that's the power of your proclamation. Now, at the end of the day, if they choose to ignore that, that's their choice. Because what we're aiming to do is do this as peacefully as possible. There's more than enough pain being caused now. And that's why when we go to court, we don't want to create fear in the constabulary. We don't want to create fear in the judiciary. We want to bring order to them. Because when we fully establish the order within those institutions, everything else comes right. Because it doesn't matter if you're a politician, if you trespass upon my right, you're committing a crime against humanity, you are breaching my peace, and Mr. Constable, away you go and do your duty. The person that's breached my peace deserves a fair trial. We all do. We don't have that happening here. So this is just a way we see of how peacefully to bring about order and help to educate people, more than anything. And so, in answer to that question, yeah, have your proclamation, carry it with you. Know who you are. You know, if you don't have it off pat, just keep practicing. It comes right. It's all part of the D program. So we're going to put those up anyway. The choice is there for people to use them. As I say, be aware of the responsibility in using them. Because these are what we call spiritual documents. They are put out there with an intent to act as to the best possible benefit to all of humanity. If you want to use them for nefarious purposes, the universe will see to that. Yeah, that's who you're stepping on.
The Privacy of Information Act between council and banks. Are they allowed to disclose your information to banks, considering your council rates?
It's a presumption. It's a presumption. If you have not given them the authority to do that, and your name is your property, and you have proclaimed your self-determination, your authority over all your property, then no, they have no right to do that.
To give it to the bank?
They have no right to do that. It's your property.
Yeah.
It's your name. Yeah. So if they've got an issue, they need to come and speak with you.
Yes.
Okay. Rather than go around this nefarious ways like they're doing in Kuiper at the moment, going in and taking unpaid rates, which were voluntary anyway, out of people's accounts. I've got one colleague over there who's had $12,000 added to his mortgage. That's debt bondage.
So that's not over yet.
Oh, hell no. No, they're still banging around in a corrupt court trying to effect some sort of change.
Oh,
But
God.
when they're ready, but it's very easy. I mean, when they talk about the debt that the people owe, that our children are supposed to owe, when councils talk about the debt that they put upon the ratepayer, you know, raise the rates, put more debt upon the people, they can raise more money because they have this perceived value of rates coming in. You know, the whole thing's corrupt as hell. But when they impose these things upon you, it's not lawful. It's not lawful. What happened with that particular individual was the mortgage guy, the institution holding the mortgage took $12,000, put $12,000 on his mortgage and paid the council $12,000. Now what that individual who signed that did was just sign my colleague into debt bondage. He can't actually afford the increase in his mortgage. Right? So when it comes to council debt and government debt, it's very simply removed. Who signed the agreement? Because I have given no one the authority to sign me into debt bondage. So when a council who you may have voted for to represent your best interest, because you wouldn't vote for them to represent any others, same as a politician, when they go and do these things and they say they have the mandate from the people to do it, but have you ever, anyone, ever given an MP the authority to sign you into debt bondage? No. So who owns the money? The ones that sign on the paper. The other ones that own the money. I don't. You don't. Not unless you agreed to be party to it. And you can't be done, you can't be coerced into this agreement through trickery, because that's fraud. So that's why it's becoming a very powerful thing. Show me your documentation. Please provide your documented lawful authority to do whatever you are doing.
Well, it's the same with ACC, it's enforced insurance, but the thing is, even if you take private insurance, at least you get a policy document to explain how it does and doesn't work. Has anyone got policy documents from ACC? And how their insurance works or doesn't work? Nobody has.
No.
So again,
Yeah, it's not full disclosure.
no.
And it's voluntary. Because again, it's agreement, it's a contract. So it's voluntary, it's absolutely voluntary. I don't pay ACC. I refuse to. As a professional fisherman, we were paying the second highest rate of ACC, second only to top dressing pilots. That was bizarre. It was a 7...
Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir. 7% of your gross income. Now, when I was involved in driving a fish truck and ended up in quite a serious truck accident and tore all the ligaments in my knees and ankles and lower back, and some years later, I was getting a lot of trouble with this, I went in to see if I could get some help. We have no record of your case, Mr. Paul. Funny that. Yeah. Oh, so you don't have a record of the fact that I got injured and I had x-rays taken? I actually went back to the place I had x-rays taken on my knees and that, and they said, well, yeah, they're just x-rays of the knees. But we have no record of your case. And this has happened to so many people. So, oh, okay, that's a breach of agreement. All right, I won't pay you any more money because obviously you are not putting the consideration back. You want me to continue to pay you. You want me to continue to pay you, but you're not there to fulfil your part of the agreement, so I cease the agreement. See? So at any time they want to come knocking on my door and say, you haven't paid ACC, I go, yeah, I know. What do you want to do about it? We'll take you to court.
How will you pay for petrol? You have when you pay for petrol.
And registration, yeah, which actually is the highest, which was an interesting thing, because how come if you've never made a claim through ACC from an automobile accident, are you still paying the same ACC levy that you're paying, that people are paying who have claimed every year? It's a corruption. So that's the position that I took with the whole tax, with income tax. My right to decide where my energy goes.
Have they written to you before you sent your question to them?
Who?
Inland Revenue.
Oh, no, once I was involved and finished with the whole GST charade and moved that off, then I just put a letter in. Because I actually found one of the early handbooks from the 60s on the front cover. It says, Inland Revenue relies upon voluntary compliance. Like, oh, cool. Thank you. You know, you don't get those handbooks anymore, but it is in the legislation, actually. It is in the legislation in the 1994 Tax Administration Act. It relies upon voluntary compliance, and that's the deception that's in it.
Does it say it only relies on voluntary compliance?
It's to promote compliance, especially voluntary compliance. Okay? Now, the interesting thing with that also, and there's a lot in that act, and it's definitely worth reading, what I find absolutely fascinating is the number of people that just go and pay tax and have never read the act.
I read the first little bit that said this act applies to blah blah blah. It was basically all government officials. Yeah, it didn't say it applied to anybody else.
Well, the Tax Administration Act 1994 is one of the very few acts that does not say act to bind the Crown, except for the section about the district courts. That's because they operate in a separate jurisdiction. They're directly linked to the International Monetary Fund, and they're directly linked to Londinium. However, they do tell you it's voluntary. You know, so read the paper. It's worth doing. Here's just some of the reasons why you don't have to pay tax. All humans are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Well, if you're born free, how can anybody impose a tax upon you against your will?
Because you were born free and then enslaved later.
Against my will. Right? Subject to all the rights and freedoms, blah, blah, blah. Slavery, debt, bondage, prohibited in all their forms. No one shall be subject to torture or to cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. Well, that just about takes the IRD out of the picture for a start. Done it. Because most of us know people who have been bankrupted, people who have committed suicide, families that have been destroyed, all because a parasitical entity thinks and believes it has the authority over you. And although tax might be voluntary, we'll hunt you down and kill you if you don't pay. You know? It's terrorism, by their own definition, imposing of an ideology using force or threats of force. Entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law, the protection of agreement of the parties. But as we see, that's not home. No one may be compelled to belong to an association, includes the IRD. Considering that freedom is the birthright of every human being, yes, you're free, but you must pay your tax. Yeah, right. Debt bondage again, because that's the most insidious form and it's the most often one done. All peoples have the right of self-determination. You can determine your own affairs, except you must pay tax. All peoples may, for their own ends, freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources without prejudice to any obligations arising out of international economic cooperation. That's all I'm exercising. I'm freely disposing of my natural wealth, that which has come to me naturally through the exercising of my abilities and the resources available to me. So, without prejudice to obligations arising out of international economic cooperation. Yeah, people that write this stuff know what's going on. It just needs us to stand to it. No one shall be held in slavery, no one shall be held in servitude. Bill of Rights, about 28, an existing right or freedom shall not be held to be abrogated or restricted by reason only that that right or freedom is not included in this Bill of Rights or is included only in part. So there's all your customary rights, there's your human rights, because they are existing. Your right of self-determination. Crimes Act, 98, dealing in slaves. Because if slavery is abolished and the slavery isn't happening, why is it written in to the 61 Crimes Act? Because it's still happening. In fact, now the police are becoming party to it, and that's what concerns a lot of us, is how the judiciary and the constabulary are actually being deceived into being part of this fraud and this corruption and this slavery. Because you ask most police, they didn't join this to enslave people. They joined the constabulary to serve. Thank goodness they did. Ethical belief. Human Rights Act 1993, Act to bind the Crown. Ethical belief. It is my ethical belief that enforced taxation is unethical. Unless when it's done without full disclosure and a commitment of once for all. Now, if I say to the IRD, yes, I'm happy to give you 10% of what I earn, then I've made a commitment to them, and they quite rightly, have the right to enforce and invoke the agreement of the parties and come and collect. However, it is done voluntary. Now, if I end up in circumstances where I can't meet that agreement, then I'll just renegotiate. I'm not going to come and steal my house that my family need to live in just because I can't meet that, because it was voluntary in the first place. So I have an ethical belief. As I say, it is my heartfelt belief in a matter of conscience that enforced taxation is absolutely unethical. Wages Protection Act, actual blind the crown, no deduction from wages. Now this can be used for all sorts of things. And I've actually put a black line master up on Universal Sovereign about that. That an employer must, payable to the worker, pay the entire amount of those wages to that worker without deduction. It doesn't say without deduction except tax. It says without deduction. Quite emphatic. Without deduction. An employer may, for any lawful purpose, any agreement of the parties, with the written consent of the worker or on the written request of the worker. Notice it doesn't say verbal, it says written. Okay, make deductions from wages payable to that worker. So all the legislation you need about for this is there.
Is there a thing in there about being paid in cash rather than a bank transfer? Because we're now being lenders at our own risk to banks.
Well, again, it's that comes under things like laws of necessity. You know, it's like the thing, oh, you're using our banknotes, then you are bound by all this bullshit. No, I'm not.
Well, in the Wages Protection Act, the only definition of money as banknotes. Everywhere else, it's not money.
Yeah.
It's only legal tender for amounts. So there is that in the Wages Protection Act.
Apparently, the head of currency at the Reserve Bank said that there are no obligations or liabilities attached to the use of Reserve Bank notes.
Exactly. It's just a means of exchange. Okay. Tax Administration Act 1994, without limiting its meaning, the integrity of the tax system includes taxpayer perceptions of that integrity. In other words, is it lawful and without trespassing human rights? No, it's not. So perception of that integrity. Responsibilities of those administering the law, in other words, the agreement of the parties, to do so fairly, impartially, and according to the agreement, according to law. Law being agreement of the parties. It's not legislation, they're being rules of association. The Commissioner of Inland Revenue, here it is, 6A. In collecting the taxes committed to the Commissioner's charge, in other words, if you've agreed to pay the Commissioner something, and notwithstanding anything in the Inland Revenues Acts, it is the duty of the Commissioner to collect over time the highest net revenue that is practical within the law, within the agreements, having regard to the resources available to the Commissioner, and the importance of promoting compliance, especially voluntary compliance. So if you've agreed to pay the tax department something, the Commissioner has a responsibility of promoting the compliance that you've agreed to, especially voluntary compliance. So in other words, if you've voluntarily agreed not to comply, that's it. They have no right, no lawful authority to come and exert their will upon you. What they do is terrorism. It's a crime against humanity, because it says so. Acts bind the Crown. Suppression of terrorism. Terrorist act. A person commits an offence who engages in a terrorist act. A person who commits a terrorist act is liable on conviction to imprisonment for life or a lesser term. Well, you couldn't really get a longer term than life, could you? An act is a terrorist act for the purposes of this act if the act falls within subsection 2. An act falls within this subsection if it is intended to cause, in any one or more countries, one or more of the outcomes specified in subsection 3, and is carried out for the purpose of advancing an ideological. Everybody must pay tax. It's an ideology. Political statute jurisdiction, or religious cause, and with the following intention to induce terror in a civilian population. That sounds like the IRD to me.
Those parts and brackets, did you write that in? Or is that
In the square back brackets?
Yeah.
Yeah, for clarification.
Yeah. Okay, that's really
Oh no, you wouldn't get that in the real thing. They'd invent a word for it. They have. That's why I had to put it in square brackets. I had to de-invent it. Translate it. Okay? to unduly compel or to force a government, enforce taxation of slavery through debt bondage upon the people, overriding their absolute human right of self-determination, or an international organisation to do or abstain from doing any act. So our government is being compelled, if they were in their true offices, were being compelled to debt bond the people, put the people into debt bondage so it can go to the Internal Revenue, so it can go to the square mile of London. Crimes of Torture Act. Obtaining from that person or some other person information or confession. These are things that are worth reading. You don't need to know these things verbatim. There's no point because even those that are supposed to be upholding them and who they bind don't know them. But it's good to know where to look for these things and start to exercise them. Public official, there's a definition of public official. Now, isn't it interesting that here, any person in the service of Her Majesty in right of New Zealand, not in service of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Her Majesty in right of New Zealand, because this came about in 1989. This act. This is the Crimes of Torture Act. Okay. 1986, we lost probably the last semblance of any lawful government here, and we became fully corporatised and listed on the Security and Exchange Commission in the United States. Well, the corporation did. They just dragged you along, or thought they dragged you along. Any person in the service of Her Majesty and right of New Zealand, but here it is actually here. So again, this actually gives us strength because we can employ this in a court. Because those who think that they're in Her Majesty in right of think they're free from all these things, but they have legislation that binds them too. Declaration of high-level meeting of the General Assembly of the rule of law on international levels. We commit to ensuring that impunity is not tolerated for genocide. Crimes against humanity or violations for international humanitarian law and gross violations of human rights law. This is another one worth having hold of. All peoples have the right to self-determination. How many documents do we need to go through before we actually get the clear understanding that we have a right of self-determination, which is the same as the right to be free? These documents don't give us that right. They reinforce it. Because the right of self-determination, as you could say, is divine. It's from the Creator. It's just that other people think that something differently. So, this is another one that I suggest you just get hold of and start having a look through. So those are all the reasons anyway. Some of the reasons. Ethical belief. Nowhere does it say that I have to pay tax. Nowhere. It's like nowhere in the Land Transport Act does it say that you have to register to the New Zealand Transport Authority. And that was why I registered my automobile to myself. And I put in made my own number plates up and put them on my automobile so it could be identified. And I put the numbers and the letters around the other way so that they wouldn't be confused. And I put a license label in my window or a registration label in my window with the identification of my automobile and the expiry date of that. And beside that I put a notice, which was a lawful document, saying the automobile was privately registered to I. But ultimately when we get to court, there is nowhere in the Act that it says that I'm obliged to register to the New Zealand Transport Agency. And as I pointed that out to the judge, and he said, so Mr. Paulie, when you registered your automobile to yourself, did you charge yourself a fee? And I said, oh no, sir, I waived that. Well, you would, wouldn't you? So, and of course, we had that interesting thing over the 2012, it's the end of the registration, which created a bit of humour for the jury. The thing is with this duty, you've got to have some fun. As I say, life's too serious to be taken seriously. So seek out the enjoyments along the journey, because the destination's actually irrelevant. Because the future is yet to be created. But we're part of creating it. So seek the enjoyment of the journey. That's the important thing.
What was the outcome of that case?
I was acquitted of all charges relating to the matter. So when a bailiff came up and said to me, or a collection agency said, what about all these unpaid registration fines? I go, oh, I was acquitted of all charges relating to the matter, and these are charges relating to the matter, are they not? He went, oh, I suppose they are. I go, I suppose. Absolutely they are. You know, I registered my automobile to myself, as is my right. I informed the system I was doing it. I even told them what my identification was, so they would know. You know, at no time did they write back to me and say that I wasn't able to do it, or I couldn't do it. No time. I asked them several times. Every time I got an infringement notice, I'd write into somebody else. Wrote into the area commander. Got his nice letter back saying he'd received it. So, you know, write to the infringement bureau. So I wrote to the infringement bureau and I said, do you have claim upon me? And they said, no, pay your fine. You know, what? They don't know. They don't know it's our job to educate them because they're our servants. So ultimately the responsibility rests with us, because we stopped educating the servants and holding them to their jobs.
Did they stop hassling you now about the fine?
Oh, I haven't heard nothing about it. The bailiff said to me, actually, because he rang me up from Auckland because I put a schedule of fees on the one in Whangarei. So he came up and he said, well, actually, I'm travelling up your way. Would I be able to call it? I said, I'll invite you in for a cup of coffee. Bear in mind, I do have a schedule of fees placed against the Ministry of Justice. I said, however, I'm inviting you in for coffee, so I won't exercise that schedule. Yeah, come on. So he did. We sat down for about an hour and a half, had a great chat. And he said, well, maybe you need to write to the judge to make sure that these are cleared. I said, me write to the judge? Oh, no. No, that's not my job. If you think a letter needs to be written to the judge, you write it. That's what we the people pay you for. It's not my job. It cost me 50 Gs anyway on spurious charges, which I could have exercised my schedule of fees. I could have been sitting in the Crown Solicitor's office now, because he got a schedule of fees as well. However, I'm not there to create fear. We're not there to create fear. We're there to restore order. So, yeah.
You still have the same registration today?
Hell, I'm not stupid. One thing I learned about brick walls. It's a waste of time banging your head against them. One, the brick wall doesn't care, and two, I can do without the headache. You know? Because I could have spent a long time being caught up and continually doing it, and this is a trap for a lot of people. You know, as they get caught up in one mode, like equity is the highest form, straw man, free man, all these other things. They get caught up in it and they lose sight of actually the bigger picture. The bigger picture is to restore order. So it operates truthfully, lawfully, to the agreement between people, restoratively, peacefully. That's what we're there for. Because once that's established, all the rest of it just goes away. What happens now is you've got people running after the TPP, the TPPA, you've got stuff for fluoridation, amalgam, chemtrails, all sorts of things happening. Okay? And a lot of people put a hell of a lot of really, really good work into that stuff to bringing it to people's minds and bringing it to their awareness. Re-establish order and the constabulary and the courts. All that goes away. Because it's a crime. It's a crime against humanity. It's a breach of our peace.